For the first time, former air marshals are speaking out about a secret surveillance program that we discovered has been going on for more than a decade.
Since 9/11, the focus has been on securing the skies, but as Fox 46 investigator Matt Grant explains, air marshals are often monitoring innocent Americans instead of suspected terrorists.
We'd be looking for yawning, whistling, wringing of hands, cold stares.
These are all excuses to go up and question someone?
Yes.
For the first time, we're hearing from two former federal air marshals about a top-secret surveillance program they say has little to do with catching terrorists.
Are the air marshals today tracking average American citizens who are doing nothing wrong?
Absolutely, 100%.
Congress is now investigating a recently disclosed program called Quiet Skies, where air marshals track and collect data on average citizens not suspected of a crime or on any terror watch list.
What they're doing is wrong.
But whistleblowers Henry Preston and Steve Theodoropoulos, who have combined 20 years' experience working for the Federal Air Marshal Service, say innocent passengers have been secretly surveilled for more than a decade.
We're stopping people that have done nothing. And that should concern everybody.
Both say Quiet Skies grew out of a behavior detection program. According to sources and internal communications, air marshals are keeping watch over passengers who arrive very late to a flight, whistle, have a strong body odor, have facial flushing, excessive fidgeting, have wide open staring eyes, recently shaved facial hair, or yawn exaggeratedly, the kind of behavior anyone might display when we're inside the airport waiting for a flight.
If I'm walking through the airport and I'm sweating, I'm late for my flight, and I'm whistling,
yes,
what are the odds I'm going to be stopped?
Well, Matt, you've just identified yourself with many of the identifiers that are on that list. Yeah. I think the odds are probably pretty likely.
The identifiers actually meet everybody's criteria walking through the door. I mean, it's stupid.
The examples are worrying, according to civil rights advocates. Fox 46 has learned exclusively that as early as 2003, air marshals questioned and surveilled a military member at Charlotte Douglas for chain smoking, took a report on a man in Orlando because he had body odor and was whistling, and questioned a woman who was late for a flight and cleared her throat. In a statement, the TSA defends its ongoing surveillance, telling us ordinary law-abiding Americans would not qualify for the program. The program places relevance on identified travel patterns along with other analyzed information and does not consider race or religion. The ability to identify suspicious behaviors before it manifests an attack is essential in disrupting or defeating an attack.
It doesn't seem right. It seems kind of funny.
I think it's appalling. I think that it's a form of discrimination.
People are tired when they're at the airport. They're cranky from going through TSA. That's not a good judge of what they're looking for.
Whatever it takes to make everybody safe is what matters.
But Theodoropoulos says this isn't making you safer. He says these surveillance tactics haven't led to the arrest of a single terrorist. The TSA would not comment on that.
They never were able to arrest anyone based upon the bizarre checklist they had.
So these were just excuses to target people?
It was excuses to generate statistics is what it was.
These whistleblowers say the Air Marshal Service has been under pressure from Congress to justify its billion-dollar budget. They also estimate less than 100 flights a day are covered by air marshals out of the tens of thousands of flights.
We're wasting resources. There are legitimate threats out there, and we're not following them. Why?
Well, last year, a Government Accountability Office report found that TSA, which runs the Air Marshal Service, could not show how effective they are at deterring terrorist attacks.
For the first time, we're hearing from a current air marshal who's speaking exclusively to Fox 46 about a controversial surveillance program. Are innocent citizens who haven't done anything wrong, aren't suspected of committing any crimes, being tracked by air marshals?
Yes.
We're concealing this air marshal's identity because this whistleblower is currently employed and would be fired for speaking out. This federal employee says air marshals are assigned to track and collect data on ordinary Americans not accused of any crime. Our informant even describes being assigned to track high-profile celebrities. Fair to say you've tracked people who weren't suspected of any crime and weren't on any terror watch list? Have you ever tracked anybody you thought you should not be tracking?
Yes. I think I'm being paid to generate statistics so that my agency can go to Congress and have statistics.
You don't feel this is in the interest of actually finding and catching terrorists?
No, it's not. Clearly, it's not.
Sources and internal communications reveal Americans have been tracked for more than a decade based on behavior cues like whistling or arriving late to a flight, even body odor. The TSA defends this as standard law enforcement practice. Have you ever been told to look for somebody exhibiting these kind of innocent behaviors?
Always, that's what the program's about. We're told what to look for, and we do what we're told. If that's what they want us to check off, that's what we check off. The program is 100% for statistical purposes. It is a complete waste of our time and resources.
Is it a way to track potential terrorists?
No, of course not. There's no merit to it. And we're not stopping people. We're just simply reporting it so that our people have something to say to Congress.
He told us, stop and talk to the black people. Get the black people because they're
the
got the
ones
warrants.
who have warrants.
But he didn't use the black people, he used the N-word.
For the first time, we're hearing explosive allegations that air marshals were instructed to target passengers based on race. That's right, race. And remember, we told you if you've whistled in the airport or if you've arrived late to a flight, you might have been secretly surveilled, according to current and former air marshals who say American citizens not suspected of any crime or on any watch list have been tracked for more than a decade. And this is one of the airports where they were using the behavioral detection program?
Yeah, it happened all over, all the airports.
Former federal air marshals Henry Preston and Steve Theodoropoulos are blowing the whistle on a secret program they say tracked innocent passengers based on everyday behaviors.
And they want to generate stats. They were looking for numbers so Congress would give them more money.
And now they're revealing new allegations that their supervisor directed them to watch over passengers based on the color of their skin when they both worked at the Orlando International Airport in the late aughts.
Because they're black, they possibly have more warrants than other types of people. And that's what we were told.
You both heard him use the N-word?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Army veteran Ed Cunningham also worked as a federal air marshal in Orlando for more than a decade. He says he too heard the racist directive several times.
How would he say this? Was it a directive? Was it very casual? If I can be perfectly blunt, and I don't even like using the language whatsoever, if you can't find any of the indicators of individuals to where we can legitimize our numbers here, just look for the they're the ones that always has the extra warrants on them. You can always find somebody. For a federal employee to do that, it's not acceptable.
All three former air marshals say they ignored the orders, but say others didn't. Theodoropoulos says he reported this to the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General, where he says the complaint went nowhere. IG officials say they're not allowed to discuss specific complaints or allegations. The TSA says that supervisor was promoted to security manager and now works at the Sanford International Airport near Orlando.
If that's the way to get promoted, I don't want to get promoted.
In a statement, the TSA says it has no record of a complaint, telling us TSA does not comment on ongoing investigations or specific personnel actions, adding they take all allegations of misconduct serious and require employees to report any violation of policy. The TSA insists passengers are not tracked based on race or religion. Now, these former air marshals say they want to testify in front of Congress about their experience as lawmakers continue to probe the ongoing surveillance methods.
Why are we wasting the resources when legitimate terrorists are out there?
Well, sources say this supervisor is under investigation for harassment in an unrelated case. I reached out to him for comment but did not hear back. The TSA says in order for them to investigate these allegations of racism, a new formal complaint would have to be made. All three air marshals tell me they plan to do.
Said I had 8 inches of waiting on you anytime you want it.
For the first time, this former cop turned air marshal supervisor is speaking out publicly, accusing a top TSA official of sexual harassment, assault, and retaliation.
He held his hands over his erection in his pants.
What were you thinking when this was happening?
I was in shock.
This is what Sonia Labasco says her then boss, Charles Chaz Cook, said to her at a work party on May 9th, 2009.
Chaz put his hand behind my neck and tried to kiss me on the mouth. So he pulled my head to his head inside the kitchen and tried to kiss me.
What did you do? How did you react to that?
I pulled back very strongly.
Then she says he strongly hinted he could advance her career if she gave in to his sexual advances.
He was the one that would help me move up the ladder, that he and I could be a power couple. I felt very sad that my supervisor looked at me as that type of object.
When he didn't get what he wanted, she alleges Cook demoted her. She claims retaliation. Labasco's now husband, who was an air marshal at the time, says he witnessed the whole thing.
What I saw is Chaz Cook grab Sonia by the back of the head and then kind of motion to his genital area.
The following year, Labasco says Cook physically assaulted her because she did not leave a meeting fast enough.
Grabbed my arm, twisted it really hard, left fingerprints on my arm, and tried to pull me out of the room. Told me to get the out of the room.
The TSA says it thoroughly investigated her complaints and found them unsupported. But this current air marshal, who we're not identifying, says they witnessed Cook grab her arm and was never interviewed by anyone at TSA.
He grabbed her arm and he shook her. She was extremely caught off guard. She grabbed the arm afterwards. It did appear to hurt her.
Labasco filed a federal lawsuit and made a complaint with the government's Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Cook denied touching Labasco, but the EEOC concluded the record established that at a minimum, Cook placed his hands upon her and grabbed her arm. The TSA sent Cook this letter of reprimand for cursing, calling his behavior, quote, unacceptable, and writing allegations of sexual harassment were of, quote, such concern he could be fired if it happened again. Then they offered him counseling. A month after settling Labasco's lawsuit in 2015, reportedly for 6 figures, Cook was promoted. The TSA refused to let us talk to him. He's now the Deputy Assistant Director, the number 3 overseeing the entire Federal Air Marshal Service.
That's like putting a fox over the hen house.
And when Fox 46 asked about the witness that was never interviewed or possibly re-interviewing Labasco, the TSA responded, this matter was resolved and said TSA stands by its employees.
I believe her.
Congressman Darren Soto stands by Labasco and in the age of Me Too believes her allegations
They're outrageous.
Deserve a second look.
There should be some reprimand rather than continued promotions. Obviously, we'll be looking into it along with our colleagues.
Because of what we found, Congressman Soto now plans to meet with Labasco and could soon be calling for a formal investigation.
I'm disgusted, I'm angry, and I'm appalled that we are dealing with this garbage every single day.
Minister Corinne Mack is outraged by what our investigation uncovered.
It disturbs me that we're dealing with this type of hatred.
On Tuesday, we told you exclusively that 3 former federal air marshals say their supervisor, who's since been promoted, told them to target black people using a racial slur.
He told us, stop and talk to the black people. Get the black people because they've got the warrants.
They're the ones who have warrants.
But he didn't use the black people, he used the N-word.
Mack, who is president of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg NAACP, is now demanding accountability.
We can't tolerate this. There's enough meat there for not only an investigation, there's enough meat there to at least temporarily suspend this person.
Mack now plans to write a letter to the TSA along with the North Carolina NAACP.
Unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me. It's completely outrageous and very troubling.
Hugh Handyside is the senior staff attorney for the American Civil Liberties Union.
It certainly seems that there needs to be some follow-up action promptly to investigate these claims.
The ACLU is now looking into Quiet Skies and the secret checklist of everyday behaviors air marshals say they were given to target innocent citizens. The ACLU says all of this raises constitutional concerns.
We cannot quietly let this go.
Back inside this house of God, this minister is seething.
I don't cuss, because that's what I would like to do right now, and thank God we're sitting in a church.
In a letter, the TSA defends its surveillance programs, telling us the use of behavior indicators like whistling and exaggerated yawning are accepted practice in law enforcement, something 2 of our whistleblowers, who are both former cops, dispute.
The fact that a supervisor in the air marshals is directing air marshals to follow black people is alarming, and it's despicable.
The Council on American Islamic Relations is now demanding the dismissal of a TSA transportation security manager days after 3 former air marshals told Fox 46 they were instructed to surveil African Americans.
He told us, stop and talk to the black people. get the black people because they're
the
got the
ones
warrants.
who have warrants.
But he didn't use the black people, he used the N-word.
You both heard him use the N-word?
Yes.
Yes.
On its website and in a nationwide news release, CARE is calling for the immediate dismissal of that federal employee, saying traveling while black or Muslim is not a threat and should not be considered suspicious. The numerous reports of TSA supervisors using race as a perceived security risk is troubling but not surprising. The TSA denies tracking people based on race or religion.
For years, there has been the phenomenon of flying while Muslim.
This all comes a week after CARE filed a lawsuit against the government on behalf of 20 Muslims who they say were improperly placed on a watch list.
The government's approach to aviation security has ultimately, in the final analysis, relied upon vulgar guilt by association approaches that don't make us any safer and result inevitably in the targeting of minorities.
And a series of Fox 46 exclusive investigations are getting results for American citizens. Members of Congress now calling for an investigation into TSA after allegations of racial profiling against black people using the N-word. Fox 46 investigator Matt Grant joins us live in the studio. And Matt, those lawmakers say the findings in your report were extremely troubling.
Yeah, Diana, disturbing allegations. Now, the House Committee on Homeland Security sent this letter to the DHS Acting Inspector General, citing our exclusive reports and calling for an expedited investigation. They now join the NAACP, the ACLU, and CARE in calling for this all to be looked at.
Well, there's nothing to explain. This is absolutely atrocious.
Florida Congressman Darren Soto reacting to our investigation, where 3 former federal air marshals told us they were directed to racially profile African Americans by a supervisor who used the N-word.
The fact that a federal air marshal may have encouraged people to racially profile African Americans is absolutely despicable, and we'll be joining Representative Val Demings in calling for an investigation. Should these allegations prove true, this gentleman needs to be fired, and there needs to be a top-down shakeup.
He told us, stop and talk to the black people. Get the black people because they're
the
got the
ones
warrants.
who have warrants.
But he didn't use the black people, he used the N-word. Because they're black, they possibly have more warrants than other types of people. And that's what we were told.
You both heard him use the N-word?
Yes.
Yes.
How would he say this? Was it a directive? Was it very casual?
If I can be perfectly blunt, and I don't even like using the language whatsoever, if you can't find any of the indicators of individuals to where we can legitimize our numbers here, just look for the they're the ones that always has the extra warrants on them.
In response to our story, 3 members of the House Committee on Homeland Security wrote a letter to the DHS Acting Inspector General calling for an expedited investigation into these allegations. The allegations stem from around a decade ago when the 3 air marshals worked at the Orlando International Airport. But the person they say made those racist directives now works as a TSA manager at the Sanford Airport. The letter says in part, the allegations are extremely troubling given the history of allegations regarding misconduct, discrimination, and retaliation within the Federal Air Marshal Service. We have long been concerned that the policies of the TSA opens the door to racial profiling. Congress now wants to know whether passengers were discriminated against based on race, whether such directives were acted upon, and whether any discrimination continues today. The TSA would not comment on this letter, but says that employee is not under investigation, was not in a position of authority over the air marshals, and says they have no record of a complaint. But whistleblower Steve Theodoropoulos says he did complain, and it went nowhere.
We reported it to the Department of Homeland Security Inspector IG. When they came down, nothing happened.
Tonight, new allegations. A TSA transportation manager accused of instructing air marshals to racially profile African Americans used racially charged language before.
He often used the N-word around me and everybody he was around.
The employee's ex-wife sent us these text messages from last year. They show the TSA manager used a shortened form of the N-word to describe an African-American male. He says it was a typo and tells Fox 46 there is, quote, a personal vendetta against him. Not so, according to 3 former federal air marshals who say that TSA employee instructed them to target African Americans when they worked at the Orlando International Airport a decade ago.
He told us, stop and talk to the black people. get the black people because they're
the
got the
ones who
warrants.
have warrants.
But he didn't use the black people, he used the N-word.
You both heard him use the N-word?
Yes.
Yes.
That employee, who we're not naming, is now a TSA transportation manager. After our investigations aired, at least 4 members of Congress and the NAACP called for an immediate investigation.
Should these allegations prove true, this gentleman needs to be fired and there needs to be a top-down shakeup.
Now, the Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General confirms to Fox 46 it is investigating whether the TSA had adequate policies in place to prevent racial discrimination when screening passengers.
Investigators did say that this is a very serious issue and that they take this very seriously.
Both former Air Marshals Ed Cunningham and Steve Theodoropoulos say they were interviewed for more than an hour about what they told us.
They were very detailed.
We're happy for the opportunity. We will cooperate with them in every way possible.
In a statement, the TSA would only say it does not tolerate racism in any form.